Find Yourself, Howard White. Hey, yes, we're here today talking live about the Pivot Conference. That's right, the Pivot Conference. It's a great event coming up this weekend. I was a little late for my appointment because I was talking about the Pivot Conference to someone in Chicago, asking how do they pivot their recruiting fair online, but that's what we got to be thinking about. How do we pivot our business no matter what it is? And so today is my pleasure to talk to someone that's going to be talking about healing for the money. HFM, that's right, HFM, healing for the money, okay? More money, more money, more money. I need my soundtrack back here. But so Stephanie, Miss Stephanie D. Mckenzie, first of all, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for, one, answering the call to the Pivot Conference, and then two, being here a little bit before the Pivot Conference to bless everyone. How you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing quite well. How are you?
Doing good, getting gooder, as we like to say down south. And so if you would just share with people a little bit about how did you take the topic of healing and when you look at your background, but to help people relate that to money, because I'm going to get right into it.
Okay. Well, for me, the construct of healing is about us, taking our wounds to the point of scarring. And many times we have emotional, familial, whatever type of wound that keeps us from really experiencing the abundance that we want. Many times that's financial abundance. I always have to caveat that and say abundance comes in many forms, but definitely financial abundance, that's the way to get our attention, right? So if I start talking about healing for the money, people don't want to heal for the love. Sometimes they do. And they don't want to heal for whatever, but they will do some healing for some money, I guarantee you.
No, you're right about that. But there's so many underlying things that have to happen before you get to the money. Oftentimes when I talk to business owners, they talk about their business, but I said, okay, how are you? And they're like, well, this and this going on. I was like, remember this. And one of my mentors shared this with me, Stephanie. And it really, he said, Howard, your business never will outgrow you. If it does, it will be somebody else's business. And that made me get on a growth spurt, really. And, how do I grow myself professionally and personally first, so I can manage this whole professional growth component. And so that is something that I challenge business owners to do, but talk about some of the underlying things that help people get ready and heal, and especially during this pandemic season where, I can only imagine the psychological and the sociological challenges that people are going through. There are some things I experienced myself, and I've been open, and I'll say this, and it's a friend of mine who never, one of the most positive person in the world. He confided in me. He said, Howard, I've never thought this, but I actually thought about taking my own life, a couple days ago. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, it's not because of COVID. I said, well, it may not be because of COVID, but it did probably compound some things that were already there. Mm-hmm. So talk about that and how people deal with those to really just get back to a baseline that they can pivot around, because we're talking about pivoting, but you got to have a solid foundation if you're going to pivot.
Definitely. And I feel like the pandemic, so to speak, has exposed a lot of our woundings, so to speak. When people become fearful, we can really see, okay, what's going on here? Like, for the longest time, I was doing lives and I'm like, listen, you are completely entitled to your emotions, but the emotions are not entitled to run your life. And so when we feel fear, the real question is, what are you really afraid of? Because you're not afraid of a virus. You're really not. You're not afraid of a virus. Because if you were, you do. What is that?
There's a bunch of viruses out there. So
yes, exactly. The health coach in me is like, there are always viruses around you, people. Always, 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 always. We become susceptible because we have poor immunity, usually because we have poor diet, poor gut health, et cetera, et cetera. So when we begin to talk about fear, and when the pandemic and Corona first came in, there was a lot of fear. The energy was strong, it was thick. And my question to everyone was, well, what are you really afraid of? Are you afraid of losing money? Are you afraid of getting sick? Are you afraid of dying and leaving your children? Are you afraid of dying and leaving your children with debt? What are you really afraid of? And once you face that, what does facing that require of you? Because you can't tell me that, you know what, I'm afraid of dying. Okay, well, why are you afraid of dying? What's going to happen when you die? Well, I didn't make great decisions and I'll leave my children with debt. Okay, well, then we need to make provision for that. Then we're inspired to take action, because we can't just sit there and say, well, I'm afraid of dying and leaving debt. Okay, well, there's an app for that, as I often say. Call an insurance agent. Let's get some life insurance on deck. Let's really look at the debt. What are you really doing? What are you doing now? As opposed to just sitting on our blessed assurances going, well, I'm afraid to die, so I'm just going to go buy 20,000 pounds of toilet paper and hope the pandemic passes me over.
Now that is, you bring up a great point. You have to get to the root cause of it. And so as you talk about getting people to that foundation and then helping people heal for the money, if you would just share a little bit about your process, because I know you're going to go into detail at the Pivot Conference, and you can register at the Pivot Conference. Just go to the pivotconference.com to pick up your tickets. They're only $20. I mean, gosh, 20 training workshops, 21. We just added one, so 21. No, we can't add any more. We're maxed out. Even though it's a virtual event, we're maxed out.
Absolutely.
Because we wanted people to have an experience, not just an event. It's the Pivot experience. And then literally on top of that, we have 4 international keynoters like Jonathan Sprinkles, Lethea Owens, Teresa Martin, who I was on with earlier today. And she, gosh, I mean, just a dynamic woman. And of course, the Dr. Cheryl Woods, who's going to kick us off in the morning, and nothing like a fireball like her. So, as you think through that, just share one or two of the things that people are going to get to go in detail with you at the Pivot Conference.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'm working ravenously on this presentation. And one of the things that I really want people to understand is what money really is. And when we understand, well, 2 things I'm going to be explaining on Saturday more in depth than I'm explaining now is what healing actually is and what money actually is. And when I do that, it's probably going to spin a few people out, because when it comes to money, depending on what generation you were brought up in and which generation brought you up, you have a particular ideology around money and finances. Yeah. And to that end, you may also have certain ideas and ideologies around how you get said money. And one of the things that I'm going to really look at is the undermining of work, because so many times we tether our money narrative, our abundance narrative, to our hands. And our hands are literally one part of it. We still have to deal with our head and our heart, like we must. And it's not going to be some ethereal woo-woo, that type of thing, but we have to look at this thing in totality. And what I love to tell people is that, yes, can you have money without, being healed and dealing with your stuff? And yeah, sure. But money without a mission is usually pure misery. That's a step.
Oh, repeat that again.
I sure will.
Money
without a mission is usually pure misery.
Now, I want you to dive a little bit right there, because that I think, as the Bible says, and people mistake the passage, the love of money is the root, not money itself. Not money itself,
exactly.
And so talk about that, money without mission.
Well, I feel like we are inherently, we're blessed to be a blessing. I know that sounds cliche, but when we focus on the love, when all it is about the money, then we can acquire money. But I know at least 10 millionaires, and about 80% of them are unhappy. They have money, their businesses are sustainable, and I'm not vilifying money, no, never. I'm not ever going to vilify it. But without a mission, without a reason to do, I want my life to be better. Okay, that's great. But when we get to the point where we're so tunnel vision on the money that we can't make sound decisions, where you're working 50-hour days, 50-hour weeks, and 14-hour days, because you got to get the money. When the money is the mission, then when it shows up, it's going to be misery, because just the money can't be the mission. The money has to have a mission. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. I can remember one of the first books I wrote, Stephanie, and I was interviewing a guy. He's right there in Houston. You may have seen the building over in Third Ward called Change Happens, right on Elgin and Scott. So it's and so literally he started out as a he quit a almost $100,000 job back in the late 70s to start this nonprofit. It's been there 30 plus years now, and to get people out of crack houses. He kept having this dream. And so when we were talking about it, he said, and it came to him, he said, Howard, almost like identical to what you said, is that once you find your true profit, your make sure I spell it right, profit, PROPHET, profit, you have found your true profit.
Yes, that makes perfect sense.
Because then you know what you're serving. And so literally I was there last year this time, and just went by, visit with him. So literally, Stephanie, he's basically, they own a whole block and a half. And so they're moving houses. And he said, I was given the foresight, build the houses where you can move them. So they're moving them out in some land they bought off south of 610, Houston. So folks in Houston, this doesn't mean anything. So you